A merger or amalgamation is presenting us with two possibilities, that the companies that come together may be dissolving after forming a totally new company, or the merging companies could be forming into one of the new identity where one of them ceases to exist. This, assuming we only have two companies, we are talking about this possibility that A Limited is merging with B Limited, where the result is a totally new company, C Limited. This is one of the possibilities of a merger, that an independent A Limited merged with an independent B Limited, where the result was a new entity. We refer to this as a statutory. This is known as a statutory consolidation. Where two independent companies are coming together, are amalgamating, and cease to exist to form a new entity. And the new entity in our example here would be C Limited. Now, we have the second possibility where we had A Limited and B Limited. They were coming together and the result is one of them, or they retain the identity of one of them. So they could result into an AB Limited or simply an A Limited, so that this is now known as a statutory merger. A statutory merger, where we have these two independent companies coming together, but they assume the identity of one, so that the dissolved company is B Limited. In the statutory consolidation, the two independent companies were coming together to form a new company, so that each of these independent companies go into voluntary winding up. That in the statutory consolidation, after the formation of the new company, we have these two voluntarily winding up. In a statutory merger, these two coming together and assuming the identity of either A or B Limited, then the one whose identity is not assumed then goes into voluntary winding up. Now, how do we effect this merger? How is the merger effected? Now, we have two companies, or we have a company that we shall be referring to as the Transferee Company, and we have the company that we shall be referring to as the Transferee Company. In respect of the statutory consolidation, where we have A Limited and B Limited dissolving to form the C Limited, C Limited shall be the transferee. We call it the transferee because it will be the benefit of the transfer of the assets of the independent companies. Now, these independent companies transferring their assets, we shall refer to them as the transferee companies. So the transferee companies A and B Limited will be transferring their assets to this company C Limited and retaining the necessary funds that will be enough to pay the debtors of A Limited, the creditors of A Limited and the creditors of B Limited. So in this statutory consolidation, the transferors A Limited and transferor B Limited will be transferring their assets to C Limited, the transferee, and retaining those funds that are just necessary to pay off their creditors. That is, A Limited retains the assets that are necessary to pay the creditors of A Limited. B Limited retains the assets that are necessary to pay the creditors of B Limited. In the statutory merger, something similar is also happening. This time round, we have no new company. It is the transaction between these two. So A Limited, in this case, is the transferee because it is the result of the merger, while the B Limited, the company that will end up being dissolved, is the transferor. So we have again the transferor company B Limited transferring assets to A Limited, the transferee, the beneficiary of the transfer, and to retain such necessary assets and funds that will be enough to pay the creditors of B Limited. So in the process of the transferring of the assets to this new identity, to this new entity that we are merging into, we must retain enough funds, we must retain enough assets that will cover the existing debt of this merging entity. So these are our two possibilities of the statutory consolidation and the statutory merger, depending on whether we are forming a totally new entity or the merging companies will assume the identity of one of these two or more merging entities. I now want to discuss the post-merger reorganizations. What are some of the realities that these merging entities will have to sort out after their merger? Post-merger reorganization. So we are looking at some of the things that these merging companies will have to deal with after the merger, as a consequence of the merger. One of the things they have to deal with will be the name and logo of the company. This is as far as the identity of this company is concerned. That we have now become a new company in the case of a statutory consolidation. So a new name has to be, we have to get a new name for our company. We have to get a new emblem, a new logo, corporate colors, and all those things that go to identifying ourselves as a body corporate. We have undertaken a statutory merger. We have assumed the identity of one of the company. So does our logo change? Do our corporate colors change? All those things again that go to identifying the company should be sorted out. The other thing that should also go into consideration will be the new organizational structure, organizational chart or structure. Organizational structure or the organizational chart. Now we have two organizations or more that have come together. So how will the new structure of our organization look like? The position of the CEO, who occupies this position, who is the head of the organization now? How does our board of directors look like? The other streams of directors, who goes where? Who answers to who? Do we come up with a new structure to accommodate the two different structures that these two companies had? Or do we have a new corporate structure defining the flow of authority within the merged entity? That has to be resolved by these companies after the merger. Matters to do with employee compensation and benefits. Employee compensation and benefits. This will need a lot of realigning. Realigning of the employee benefits and compensation. The reason is these were previously different entities. They may have had a different remuneration policy for these two different companies. Now that they have become one company, then we need to harmonize the employee compensation. We need to harmonize the employee benefit schemes that this new entity has now to implement, since they have now become one. Some of the other things that we will also need to relook will be property ownership. Property ownership. That we had previously the assets of A Limited and the assets of B Limited that were registered in the name of A Limited and B Limited. That now that these two have merged and they have now become one entity, we may now need to have the transfers of these assets to this new company formed, or this new entity formed, C Limited. We will also need to do a lot of communication. We will need to do a lot of communication to interested parties. A lot of communication has to be done to interested parties. Think about our employees. They need to know that we are merging. Think about our customers. Think about our relationship with banks and other service providers, that we need to notify them of the changing realities, that we are now merging with another company, that they will now be dealing with a new entity post-merger. The other things that also need to be addressed after the merger is the realigning of the company's accounting systems. The realigning of the company's accounting systems. Now that we have become one, we may have previously operated different accounting systems in our existence and separate organizations. Now that we have become one, we need to rearrange, we need to reorganize our accounting reporting systems so that we have a common reporting method adopted by the new organization. This will also go to touch on other things such as the internal control systems that have to be realigned. With the two different organizations now coming together, they need to realign such things as their internal control systems that will now work for the new amalgamated or the new merged entity.